guess we're changing the name. We're making a commitment. We're putting our money where your mouth is. You'll see a forecast Appendix J that's got some very large fleet replacement, leisure centre refurbishment. That's electric vehicles. That's CO2 reduction. That is a huge programme that's budgeted £41 million at this moment in time, and we're currently allocating £15 million to the start of that programme as part of the budget. But again, happy to take any more political questions. Obviously, the more operational questions, I will refer to the able team. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Serkis.
I don't know specifically, but we will Google it and find out very quickly. Come back to you. It is, yes, because there will be 10 vehicles with crews and fuel and maintenance running around the countryside, picking up a weekly collection of the food waste.
Oh, I see. All right.
So the 1, 2, 3 would be a weekly one for the food waste.
So this is extra to maintain the fortnightly service, but also add in the food waste. What about the collection that I just
I haven't got full details of the waste collection service. We obviously are continuing to explore that. We've gone a step further than any other council has before, that we've allocated the money in the budget to achieve this as a task within the next 24 months. So there'll be a budget reserve to achieve that. So that's a fantastic news. Several other authorities in the country, as you're fully aware, have gone down this route. There is a two-tier pricing structure that our county colleagues are actually selling some of this food waste and are making money out of it. And the single tier, the unitary authorities, are actually finding that their cost increase are nowhere near what we've budgeted for. There is a new burdens allowance that has been given to the councils that have already gone down this route, and obviously we are significantly hoping that we don't spend all that level of money. There is liable. If we can work with our county colleagues to get a fair proportion of that funding shared between the two-tier authorities, I'm hoping that we can achieve this in the 24 months with spending nowhere near the amount of money that we put in the budget. I'll be honest. I'm hoping we get the new burdens grant, and I'm hoping that we achieve this. And obviously, if we go to a 1, 2, 3 waste strategy, then we hope to get significant savings on the figures that we've got in the budget. But the exciting news is that we've allocated the money to achieve this, and we are looking to make it happen, and having the money there is a real success story. I can't answer your question though specifically. I will have to come back to you, Philip, in writing about that particular question.
I do know either they are trialing that or they have done some work on that already. I don't know the detail, but I can come back to you on that.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much. Councillor Circus spoke about having the lowest council tax in Sussex, and of course part of what the council tax is the level of council tax reduction we're able to provide, including the £150 for the people who are in need. So can I just, as first of my three questions, ask for clarification of whether we are still actually in genuine and active discussion with West Sussex and the police about the possibility of them accepting this, or have we basically shrugged our shoulders and are sitting waiting for a no answer?
I personally chased that twice myself in the last week. The Director of Corporate Resources sent me a reply. We've had a telephone conversation. County are discussing that. They are pleading poverty. They are saying there is some minimal amount of finance in the budget, which may mean that we get something. The positive news is the government has given us a sum of money, which I believe works out around £25 per person. So there is something from the government. My best guess at this stage, according to the information that the Director of Corporate Resources has given me, is that County may give us some share of some money that they have left. What that looks like is possibly nowhere near the £150, but may give us something more towards it. Obviously, we have allocated funding, and we don't particularly want to cut back on anything this year. So the issue we took to the Finance PDAG is that we may look to completely fund the £150 ourselves from Horsham Council, should our county colleagues not come in. Hopefully, if our county colleagues come in, we may be able to go a little bit higher than that as well with the budget that we've allocated.
Well, having heard this dragging on and understanding the situation, yes, there's this worry that there would be nothing from them. So it is encouraging to hear that there is still at least something in play to make sure that Horsham District Council isn't doing the whole job here. So thank you very much for that. The second thing I wanted to ask about is that you mentioned the efforts that have been put into raising revenues, which is obviously important. One stream of which is the parking revenue. That's a major stream. And can I ask what discussions there have been and are ongoing with West Sussex in terms of their charges for on-street parking, which have an interaction with our car park charges? Because we have an ongoing situation still where the on-street parking tends to undercut the off-street parking, despite the fact it has more social problems associated than off-street parking.
I think I have to come back to you on that one, Councillor Fletcher, with probably a written reply, as I'm unaware of the answer. Unless the Director can answer that question specifically. No, we'll come back to you with a written reply to that. I know that we have been addressing differentials in car park charges across the town. I know that our car parking manager, Rob Leake, has had discussions with Waitrose in the last 2 weeks about the charge that they make for their car park, because that particular car park was full up over Christmas and not everyone was using that for shopping. And upon checking back on the planning conditions, when that store was granted planning permission, there was a covenant or a planning condition that said they have to make the same charges as the rest of the town. So it appears when you dig deep into these things that there are agreements between working authorities to charge similar prices. So yes, so we'll definitely look into that. Come back to you in writing, and we'll both make a note of that and come back to you.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very worthwhile area to be following up. The third and last thing I wanted to ask was about the local plan, which has not gone through again, and therefore we have got additional costs that we're facing in drawing up the local plan that we would have anticipated to have been pretty much done and dusted by now. We have additional liabilities in terms of further work and costs in defending against speculative appeals. And because the housing number is still very much unknown because we have no local plan, we have a wide potential range of numbers of houses that we could be ending up building, which will affect our planning income. So I'd like to understand how we are handling that within the budget.
I'll answer that question by saying that I believe the local plan will come back to council later this summer. I believe that is an objective and expectation that the consultation period ends in April from DLAC, and we're hoping for a short delay. The size of our planning team, the number of officers is exactly the same. That the strategic planning team, there is no intention of hiring more staff. So I'm not envisaging any other costs. I will ask the director of resource if he wants to come in on this one, but we are talking about a short delay, and obviously with everything there is a risk of speculative development. However, we are currently bound by water neutrality. Anyone that puts in an application scheme will have to prove a very high bar of water neutrality. We are liable to turn that down, and it will come back on appeal probably after the date the local plan is passed. So at this moment in time, to the best of my knowledge, increased fees will be minimal, and certainly there is. I haven't seen any appendix or change to the budget since that decision was taken to pause the local plan whilst waiting for further information. I'll pass over to the director of resources.
The other point, perhaps just to pick up, is that we wouldn't budget for speculative appeals and losses on those sorts of appeals anyway, in any circumstance, because we wouldn't expect anything to come in and we wouldn't lose it. So.
I didn't catch the end of that sentence.
Well, because we don't know whether anyone would actually speculatively appeal, then it's very difficult to budget for that.
Anything else?
Thank you very much, Chair. Apologise if I've missed this over the last few presentations you've done. So I'm recapping really, but I just wanted to be absolutely sure that I've got this right. You did make that announcement about the match funding from government for the 14 houses or whatever. And I gather that our figure is 3.1 million to match that 2.57 or whatever. Where's that 3.1 million coming from?
It would probably come from reserve.
Right, the general reserve.
Probably, yes.
Okay.
Well, and I say that hesitantly because at the point that we actually do the expenditure in terms of the capital program, we may have capital receipts from something that we would use instead if we're not going to spend that on something else. So until we actually press the button on that expenditure, I'm not entirely certain. I will make that decision at the point that we actually do it. So I will say either capital receipts or reserves. It will come from a funded source, so we won't be borrowing externally for it. We have enough resource across our different options to be able to do it, and I will do it in the most efficient and effective way at the point.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought you were going to say. In reserve, when it does talk about reserves, 10.3 said the budget gaps over the medium term amount to 3.1. That's quite interesting that we've got 3.1 for housing and one for match funding. It just happens that way, I suppose. But we're also going to have to use our reserves for the other areas where we need to supplement what we have, which will bring our general reserves down, presumably from 20 to.
It will bring them down. I would hope that we would invest those though, so that they generate an income. And it's about converting, isn't it, the reserve into a form of income that reduces that budget gap.
Right. But if we use our reserves to sort of keep our level at whatever it is, that might bring us down to what, 12 million, somewhere around there?
I couldn't put a number on it, but it will be in excess of our minimum level of £6 million reserves.
Okay, but we will have to keep on doing that over the next few years. Is that a fair assumption?
It depends exactly how we go about filling that gap though. So for example, if we had a site that wasn't being used that we could put affordable housing on, that generates an income, but we might partition that site and sell some of that site to fund the housing itself, and therefore there's no cost to that, and then you get the income. So there are different ways in which we can approach it, some maybe more commercial than others.
Okay, thank you.
I noticed you got an increase in council tax of 2.9% for this year, but I noticed in future years, it's only going to be only put in a figure of 2%. I'm wondering why you dropped, because of 2.9% is already a low figure in comparison with other councils, and I was wondering why you just put it in at 2% for future years, which is even lower. It's a good thing. I'm not complaining about it.
No, Councillor Daw, historically, who was the cabinet member for finance and held the finance portfolio himself for a number of years, always put 0 in the budget, which didn't seem a realistic figure. I think he was challenged numerous times by lots of people, but and that always made the budget gap bigger. To come back to Councillor Skip's point, so having a realistic figure. I mean, I've checked back over the last I think 10 years since the Conservatives have been in power, and the average, in fact, going back to year 2000, I think, so the last 22 years, the average budget is 1.99% increase. So it would seem prudent and realistic to put a realistic figure in there, and that figure looks, realistic to me.
Thank you. A question for the cabinet member. Can council reserves ever be too high?
I was actually challenged that it was too low. The figure has remained at 6 million for a number of years, and with inflation at 9%, there was a question mark as to would it be prudent to increase our level of reserves. The Director of Resources looked at similar neighbouring authorities, and they were between I think 10 and 27% of their net expenditure. Our figure of 6 million is between 44 and 44% of our 13 million pounds expenditure. So it does seem at a very reasonable level, and are our reserves too high? Well, let me bring your attention to Appendix J. Appendix J is our medium and long-term capital infrastructure programme with reducing carbon commitments. The headline figure at the bottom right-hand corner of that slide is 42 million pounds. If you go through the accounts, and you roughly 20 million pounds in general reserves, we have the 15 million pounds in the green infrastructure reserves. It's only 35 million. You minus off the 6 million pounds minimum reserves, that's 29. We're potentially 12 million pounds away from where we need to be to achieve our objectives. So whilst this is a very prudent, I guess, healthy looking budget, for us to deliver on our promises, our expectations, our museum, our fleet refit, our leisure centre refurb, our car park refurbishment, our housing plans, we still have money to find, something like 12-13 million pounds by 2030, 2031, and it may be necessary that we even need to borrow to achieve these longer term goals. So are our reserves too high? No, we have a plan in place to spend that money. You'll see some massive figures in there: 6 million pounds for refurbing our 2 leisure centres, 3 million pounds refurbing the capital. There's money on housing, car park, office refurbishment, fleet replacement. It's a very prudent financial plan that's been well run over a number of years, and I think our reserves are acceptable, but I would not say they're too high. No.
Thank you. You answered my question clearly. Reading Appendix J, of course, that's all speculative and all guesses and political choices about what we do in the future. And I would, of course, always advocate borrowing to invest in infrastructure where possible. Nevertheless, at the moment, we have over 20 million pounds worth of reserves, and people are significantly struggling with their finances. Is 1 million pounds enough? Why not 2 million? Why not 5 million for the funding guarantee grants? Why not raise council tax the maximum amount and then rebate it to the people who need it most? Perhaps, but if that means helping out people that really need it and are really struggling, Councillor Clark, is that not what we should be doing? Should we not trust people with their finances?
Thank you, Councillor Scrutiny. Obviously, we have to draw the line somewhere. We are a district authority. We are not a government. The government has numerous schemes to which on our website we have indicators to a plethora of schemes that are open to those that are in need. We have this council has a community service team. We are one of very few councils in the country that have a community service team. When I spoke to the Rob Jarvis, who's the head of our communities team, I asked the question, how many other councils in the country have a community service team? To which it was barely any. It's a non-statutory service that we provide. In his opinion, it was the most well-funded, well-resourced community service team at district council in the country. Not only last year did we double the amount of resource going into that department, we put over £500,000 in last year. So to kind of answer your question, I'm always looking to see what are the best councils do in the country. What can we learn from neighbouring authorities? What are they doing better than us? And on this occasion, I'm not saying there isn't more to do, because there always is more to do, and that's why we've doubled the budget allocation for this year. But we are not resting on our laurels. We are trying to help as many people as we possibly can. We are seeing the need for bed and breakfast accommodation going up. We are seeing the need for further support in our food banks, and we are proactively, from the events we've been doing this year, acting to that. At this moment in time, that £1 million, we haven't got a clear strategy to spend that. We have obviously Appendix B, you've got the money to Citizens Advice, Age UK, Transport Links, Henfield. There are lots of things that we have allocated funding to, including the extra resource given to Citizens Advice. But at this moment in time, I think £1 million is an adequate level, and certainly higher than I've heard from any other district council of our size out there. But obviously, this is a decision for full council to make.
Please, can I continue, Chair? Is that okay? Thank you. How many people do you think has it been calculated with the £1 million extra help in our district? Has that been calculated?
No, there is not a detailed budget plan on how best to spend that resource. We have a wide ranging number of schemes that we supported last year, which we're going to continue to support. The amount of that £1 million that we have to allocate to the council tax relief scheme is flexible, depending on the level of investment that county come in with us for. So I can't give you a specific answer to that question. I did ask for questions in advance of this meeting. If I had known that question in advance of this meeting, I would have been happy to prepare you more detailed.
I appreciate that, and perhaps it may well be asked at the budget meeting. I would like to know, from a human perspective, what does that £1 million do for someone on the ground? You know, what will they see for that 1 million? What does that get? You know, our residents. So that's something which I'd like you to go away at and think about from the human element, because to not have a detailed plan on how we're going to spend the £1 million, yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Pratt.
Yes, the future of the drill hall and the Broadwich Heath leisure centre, the running track. We seem to have two underutilised assets in need of some expensive refurbishment, and trying to decide what to do with them. And I recall the first leisure and culture PDAG that I went to, and I first became a councillor 3.5 years ago. It was on the agenda. The drill hall was on the agenda then. In fact, I had to go to the drill hall and have a look at it because I had no idea. I'd never been there, so I had to arrange a visit before the meeting. And it seems that we've been trying to work out what to do with it ever since. And now the British Legion isn't going to go ahead as we hoped. We've really got to make a decision about what to do. So where are we headed with both of those projects?
Thank you. So just to be crystal clear, there's money allocated in the budget for the continued running of those resources for next year. So there is no immediate decision to be made on either of those assets at this moment in time. They are more part of the medium-term financial strategy going forward. We are going back out to chatting to key stakeholders around the drill hall, around possible uses for it. You most likely are aware that the CO2 rating, the carbon rating of the drill hall itself is very low. The offices are very reasonable, but the building itself requires up to £1 million worth of investment to keep it to bring it up to CO2 standards. And I believe ultimately the large running costs and possibly the COVID pandemic are some of the factors involved in the Royal British Legion pulling out of that particular deal. But at this moment in time, to be crystal clear that the money is allocated to the budget and there is no decision being made on that imminently, we will go back out to consultation with our further stakeholders. There is something, obviously, you may have seen some money allocated in the budget towards potential council offices. This very building we're in, our lease is up on this building. This comes in a very similar situation to the drill hall, that it requires a lot of money to bring the CO2 rating of this building up to standard. And our lease does expire within the next few years, and there are break clauses that our landlord, West Sussex, may or may not serve. The drill hall, it could possibly be an option for the council offices. That's something that has been suggested, as is a possibility of affordable housing on that site, as is the possibility of refurbing that building and keeping it as an ongoing concern, as it has been for a number of years. There was obviously wide public appreciation of that building. You'll probably be aware that myself and Councillor Mitchell, cabinet member of the town centre, were vehement that we wanted to keep it, campaigned very hard. So there are members of the current cabinet that care passionately about that building and wish to see it used to the best of its ability for as long as possible. So Councillor Mitchell and I have tried our best to maintain that building, as have a number of other councillors, but any further decisions would obviously come back before full council with a range of options to discuss. The running track is a separate issue. The running track does have huge refurbishment costs. There's a figure quoted in the budget, I believe, of 280,000 to refurbish and replace the running track. Again, that is a loss-making bit of infrastructure that costs us £30,000-40,000 a year for Places Leisure to manage that on our behalf. You will be aware that the Christ Hospital were granted planning permission to build a running track. They are building a brand new all-purpose facility. When that facility comes online, our residents will have a choice of using a brand new purpose-built state-of-the-art running track or a 30-year-old running track. I think we fear that a bit like if you hold an old gym and a new gym opens up just down the road, that we may lose some of our key stakeholders, our key clients to that particular leisure facility. So it is a possibility, and again, it would be a full decision for council, not imminently, sometime perhaps in the next 5 years, to make as to the most appropriate use of that particular block of land. It is a highly valuable piece of land that the council could sell. It could make affordable housing. It could use it for a plethora of other uses. Again, that's not a decision for today. Today's budget purely states the ongoing running costs. So, unable to really answer your questions at this stage, other than to say that there'll be decisions for the medium term within the next 5 years.
Councillor Landau.
Thank you. Obviously, if we're going to meet our targets on the environment for 2030, we're going to need to generate some more income, because at the moment we don't know exactly how much that's going to cost. It's going to cost, I mean, people are talking about £40 million, which means at the end of 2027, we'll see our reserves down to something like 6 million. We've mentioned the running track and the drill hall. We also have the London Road car park. I don't know how much income that could generate, or how far we've gone with that now.
The London Road car park has costed out. Planning permission was granted by Planning North for houses on that site that do deliver a small return on investment. Obviously, the primary purpose of that particular investment is to deliver affordable housing for the council. However, it is forecast to deliver a small percentage profit. So it is ticking sort of all the boxes in terms of an ethical or moral obligation. Councillor Skip mentioned that the other affordable housing option that the government scheme have presented us for housing the Ukrainian and Afghan refugees. On paper, that one looks like a gift horse. The government is giving us £2 million if we sort of fund match £3 million. So in many ways, if we can purchase the houses within the timescales, I think it delivers a minimum of 2% and around a 6% return on investment. Potentially increases our housing portfolio. Potentially helps, from a moral and ethical objective, helps this council, rehome some of the Afghan and Ukrainian refugees later down the line. If we are able to deliver within the timescales, there are a few barriers that we need to overcome. But from a financial point of view, that was decision was supported by the finance PDAG, and I suspect they're the most frugal amongst you. I suspect from a community, from a moral and social standpoint, I would hope that it would get the support of full council.
Apologies to come back. Is that okay to come back? Just on the running track. Was that correct, Councillor Hogben, that you said it would cost? Was it just £250,000 to upgrade? Did I hear that correctly before I asked my question?
I believe that's what it said in the budget. If I'm reading it correctly, I have heard figures up to 400,000 quoted, but the last figure I read was 280.
Okay, thank you. So why are we prepared to spend, let's say, £350,000 on the museum, but not £250,000 on upgrading the running track? And is there any truth that we would pay Christ Hospital money to use their facilities? And how does the cabinet member feel about the council subsidising a private school that has £500 million in its war chest? Is that acceptable for the state to subsidise a private school like that? So there's two separate questions for you there, please.
Okay, none of those particular items are at all mentioned in the budget, and I'm not entirely sure are relevant to the budget of this meeting, but I will answer them to the best of my ability. Christ Hospital is a private entity that runs a running track. The running track is a current loss-making asset, which we spend, I believe, between £30,000 and £40,000 a year to Places Leisure to administratively manage and run on our behalf. It would be my expectation that if a subsequent other provider, so be it whichever provider that is, offered an alternative facility, in order to grant that community use and ongoing use, that perhaps that management fee, that administration, that booking system would possibly be given to another authority. So that £30,000-40,000 a year. So hypothetically, let's say it was, with inflation, it was £50,000 a year, whilst I guess I would have no desire to particularly pay anything to Christ Hospital to run for the implementation of that track. If they are opening it to community use, if they are making it available to all the existing users of the running track, should that facility close, then there may be a fee that is paid to them to support the ongoing community use. I hope that answered the question.
Councillor Joe.
Firstly, Chairman, may I apologise for being late. I was caught up on other things, so I apologise for not being here dead on the dot at 5:30. In fact, not even at 6 o'clock. If I may just talk very briefly on a couple of items on the budget. First off, what is I think it's called SIPFA? Is it the organisation that looks after public funds? Do they have a guideline figure as to what your reserve should be, your general reserve should be, based on a percentage of your net expenditure? And if so, what is that figure?
I don't know the answer to that. But the specific.
If I was to suggest to you that it's 5%, would you think that would be correct?
I think that would be very low. But if you're telling me that is correct, then
I'm just suggesting to you if it is 5%. That is probably why, even so, the 6 million has never been, well, in my living memory, which is pretty short, council business has not changed from the £6 million. So there's just one point to be made. I think we should be advised, and I advise the cabinet member to actually click on that one, and we can all look at different authorities. Some have no reserves at all. Some are on the teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. So if you believe the popular press. So I think that's quite interesting for us. And you might comment on that when we come to the cabinet or the council meeting. If I could then take you very quickly onto this Appendix J and the various capital sums that we've got lined up. I think, and I may be wrong, I think these are very much guesstimates from officers. So therefore, we have to take these with a pinch of salt. And I'm fascinated that we're going to spend or potentially spend £6 million in looking after our leisure centres in the next 3 to 4 years. And I just wondered, roughly speaking, can anybody give any idea as to how that 12 million is divided between our leisure centres? Bearing in mind that one of them, probably the most expensive one, has only just been opened.
I can't because we haven't done the detailed work. It is, you're absolutely right, a guesstimate. But if we were to replace one of those leisure centres, because some of them are coming towards the end of their economic life, then it would be a figure much larger than 12.
Sorry, Chairman, I just wondered, our director has very kindly said that some of our leisure centres are coming near to the end of their economic life, and obviously he must have one or two in mind. Which one is it, the pavilions or the bridge?
Well, the pavilions, I believe, is 20 years old, so it probably has another few years to be nursed through. And of course, the maintenance costs do get more expensive as the building gets older, as you probably well know. But there are others, aren't there? So Billingshurst and is it Stenning, the other two, obviously they are tied into other sites as well, aren't they? So one is on the site of a school, I believe, but they are tiring and they are getting to the point where we need to start thinking about, do we want to do it up for a few years, or do we want to actually knock it down and make it a really good and environmentally sound one? The latter choice there is obviously very, very expensive. There are examples of passive house type leisure centres in other parts of the country that cost £40 million. I wouldn't be suggesting that we go down that route, but it is something that we will need to do to work out what we want to spend on it. And they do need refurbishing. And at the time the contract with Places Leisure changes, would be the opportune time between contracts to do them up and to make them more environmentally sound.
Yeah, can I just make a comment that have we been putting forward a sinking fund in our accounts or making a depreciation allowance for, shall we say, the plant and machinery at these leisure centres? If you're saying the pavilions is 20 years old, I don't know what we spent on that. We've actually spent quite a lot of money on that since it was built, mainly on defects, I understand, but never mind. We won't go into that now. But I just wondered whether we're making any provision for this instead of just putting in these large capital sums now.
No, we haven't been. No.
Would it have been prudent to do so?
Possibly, but that's what the reserves are there for, aren't they? So you could put some of that general fund reserve already now into an earmarked reserve for that very purpose.
Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. Could I just take you on to, sorry, I'm just going to have to refer to my on-screen thing. Could I then take you on to actually this question of the capital revamp, which we put in as £3 million? Now, we've just heard from the cabinet member, and perhaps you might like to remind us, cabinet member, that we don't want to put any money into the running track, or there's a potential that we review the running track at Broadbridge Heath because it makes a loss. Is the same philosophy not applicable to the museum?
Thank you, Councillor Jupp. This comes up every year, I believe. The museum is seen by many as our cultural heritage. It's seen as a jewel in the crown. It is loved. It has historically been one of the most visited places in West Sussex. It is an asset to Horsham Town, which many love and cherish. We are a council that provides more than the statutory services. Our museums, our parks, our theatres are things that we don't have to fund as a council, but they're part of the service that makes Horsham a great place to live, and we still deliver that with the lowest council tax in West Sussex. So we aren't sitting here looking at cutting services. We have been financially prudent in this council for a number of years. We've taken over £1.4 million in salaries out, I believe, in 2020. at this moment in time, we are not looking to cut back any further. We've had prudent and wise financial investments, and the capital is not the Capital Theatre and the museum are not currently under threat or risk.
Could I just come back on that? I'm interested about that, and I'm sure the museum is well loved by a number of people. However, I'm not quite sure how many people love the museum to the extent that justifies the subsidy that or what we have there. As we heard last time when we met, I think the anticipated visitor numbers are something going to be in the order of 20,000 in the current year, considerably less than the 90,000 that was thought to be applicable for a number of years. But we did find out, and I think the director sent me a note on this one, said that in fact the clicker, or whatever you like to call it, was actually counting people who are walking up and down the causeway rather than going into the museum, which was a shame. But can I just wonder, on this question of the running track, do we have any comparable numbers for the people who use the running track? Because I do remember a few years ago when this first reared its thought, when Christ Hospital made their planning application, there was quite a lobbying, if I remember, from Blue Star Harriers and other people. And I just wondered if we could compare that. There were some figures done at the time. Are there more people using the running track that costs us 30,000, 40,000 pounds a year than are using the museum, which costs us 150,000, 180,000 pounds a year?
I may have to ask my colleague, Director of Communities, that question. I know we are collecting some data though on the number of users. Obviously, it's been difficult over the last few years with COVID, etc. But we are collecting as much data as we can for that very sort of question.
Well, the only reason I asked that was because when this was looked at a few years ago, I can remember our then cabinet member for leisure arguing very strenuously for the problems that we had, or the costs that we were looking at there. And I just thought we might have had some historic information on that.
Councillor John, I believe Councillor Bevis has indicated that Roger Knoll, who's the current cabinet member for Leisure and Culture, is attending your future meeting. So I think some of these questions may well be prudent for Councillor Knoll or whoever is the cabinet member for Leisure and Culture at the moment in time. Off the top of my head, and this is, please forgive me if this data isn't accurate, the running track has around 27,000 unique users a year. Which obviously, if you divide it by 12 months, is sort of 2,500 users a month. It's roughly 90 people a day. They are the same users each month. They are regular track bookers. They're not like the museum where they're different users. You get the same sports groups and community groups that use the track on a regular basis.
That's an interesting comment. I don't know where your evidence is for that about the users for the museum. But it would be, very much grist to the mill if you could, if that information is put forward. My impression is that there are very regular, they're friends of the museum, I think, or people will know, who are there very regularly. And that clicker goes every time they come in, go out for a cup of coffee and come back again. So that is why I was always amazed about the figure of 90,000 that was spent. Okay, thank you. Could I just take you on, Zoe, if I may, Chairman, to a question of the capital revamp. On the same argument that's been put forward for the running track, we have a very fine capital, lots of people enjoy it, but not enough to make it break even, I'm afraid, for one reason or another. So we're making a loss there, and I think, I can't remember what it is at the moment, but perhaps somebody could remind me, is it 100,000, 200,000?
I think in the budget it's probably nearer 300,000.
It's £300,000 to make a loss on the
Subsidy to
So applying your argument for the running track, we're going to put 3 million into the capital in 25-26. I'm not quite sure what that will do to the capital to make it more attractive, or is it just a question of just maintaining the fabric and continuing it as is? And I just wonder, on the same argument we're using about the running track, and I know we have a lot more people go to the capital, but shouldn't you be applying the same logic to that expenditure? Because I'm worried about these figures here totally, and they are, at the moment, they are guesstimates, as the director has told us.
Thank you, Councillor Jock. You will be fully aware, and I believe you've heard this before, that
It's well loved, I know.
The Capitol Theatre is well loved. There is a difference between these facilities. That the running track is a regional facility. People do travel from outside of our district to use that particular running track. There are not that many running tracks in the southeast. I know they're fortunate to have another one at K2 Leisure Centre in Crawley, but you do have to go quite far to find a running track at times. The Capitol Theatre. All councils are looking at commercialisation. They are looking to try to break even. They are looking to try to offset that deficit to their accounts. Part of that £3 million is to reduce the budget deficit. Councillor Noel, I believe it may not be ready for next month if he's coming next month to overview and scrutiny, but there is a large bit of work being undertaken by Vicky Wise is the head of department, which will come to council later in the year. Obviously, this will have to come back to council for approval, but there is a commercialisation strategy, possibly to increase the slant or the pitch of seating and get more seating into the theatre to get nearer to a budget break-even point of the capital. So. Part of that fund is I understand is CO2 and carbon reduction and LED lighting, and there's lots of other things going on, but part of it is a reseating arrangement to make the Capitol Theatre more commercially viable, because obviously it is a goal of our council to get that budget deficit to a lower figure. But we are a council looking to make Horsham a great place to live. It's not all about, Horsham Council is not all about making a profit. We're not running a business. We're offering a community services to a community that make this a great place to live. So I believe the capital is an asset and a much loved asset to Horsham, that we can look to get that budget deficit as low as possible. And what I would advise is some of these questions that you have tonight, let's jot them down. Let's see if Councillor Noel can give us a more detailed answer next time he's in. And I did encourage, and I did send an email to community services asking for questions in advance, so I hopefully could give you more detailed answers. And I think that's definitely one that Councillor Noel will be able to answer for you later in the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, could I just ask a question on the capital expenditure? Forgive me, my screen's not going to come back again. I just would like to ask the question. It's more of a parochial matter with regard to Billingshurst, and I'm sure we'll all know what that question is going to be, and it's going to be the car park that we now are looking to spend £165,000, but not till 25-26. This was in the budget many years ago. Are we confident that this will even be spent then? Because it's been put off for year after year after year. And we bought the asset on the basis that we would do the car park. This is 52, 54 High Street. We bought the asset on the basis that a car park would be delivered within what I would call a very short order. And that has not been the case. And it's now fallen back again to 25-26. How confident are you that it could be done even by then? What shall I tell my parish council?
I believe Councillor Jupp could answer this question better than I could. The issue around Billingshurst car park, to the best of my knowledge, is that there is a lease on the existing building which is set to expire that particular year. The current tenant on that particular building is playing incredibly hardball and is not allowing us. They hold a ransom strip, they hold a lease on that particular land, which is enabling us to carry out our car park refurbishment, our restructuring of that particular bit of land. However, when the lease is due for renewal, obviously we will be looking to renegotiate that lease on favourable terms to help us to complete that. Now, I'm speaking out of turn. This is not my portfolio. This is third-hand information that I have read in emails. I can come back with a more detailed answer, but I believe this is a legal matter to do with the expiry date of a lease, and the reason why it's phased in that particular way is to coincide with the expiry date of that lease, when our best guesstimate is one. Don't use that word. Our estimate that we can deliver on the lease expiry.
My point really is here. This was something that was in the programme some time ago, and there was a business case, I believe, raised for this, and we anticipated this was happen. Regrettably, that information or the premises that business case were made have not been fulfilled. So we must be very careful when we put things in budgets that we're on sure ground. Otherwise, we raise people's hopes, and when they're delayed or dashed, we reap the dividend.
Councillor Fletcher, then Councillor.
Thank you again. Since Councillor Jupp has raised the issue of the museum again, my understanding is that we are waiting for a new 5-year plan for the museum. So I'm hoping that Councillor Knoll will be able to tell us more about that. But maybe it would be appropriate for the chairman to, in discussions with Councillor Knoll before he comes, to ask whether he could cover the where we are on the 5-year plan, and in particular the measures that we're looking at to increase both community and tourist use. So, for example, wayfinding from the town, improved external visibility, possibly by using the exterior area for some public art that's linked to the museum and attracts people in, and better signage, engagement, and maybe even things like audio tours, worksheets and so on, once people get there, to increase the enthusiasm of people. And whether we have any plans for the website and social media, and linking up with the local societies, Horsham Society, Museum Society. So that was the one strand I'd be very keen to hear from him on. But also part of the plan is to be disposing of the White Lion barn, which would be a revenue generator, income generating activity. But this will mean that the issue of disposals comes very much to the fore. And I'd like to ask whether we can ask Councillor Knoll to update us on how we're treating the disposals policy.
Thank you. Councillor Surrey.
I just wonder whether somebody can update me on what our policy is about actually getting in council tax. I know there was a period when we decided, it was decided at cabinet level all years ago, I won't say to go soft, but let's just say not be as strong in our approach to collecting in council tax from defaulters. And I just wonder at the moment what our policy is. I mean, if I can say, I've talked to people in revenue and benefits, and quite a lot of people, it seems to me our staff who are at the sharp end of this actually get quite frustrated dealing with people who put every other conceivable item of expenditure higher up their list of priorities than paying their council tax. Some of these people have actually told our staff that they regard payment of council tax as the lowest of their financial obligations and priorities. Anyway, can I ask somebody can tell us what is the policy? Because we have at times when we've gone strong on enforcement and collection, and times when we've been less strong and trodden softly on this. Can somebody tell us what the position is now?
I think we're probably doing both, because it depends on exactly who you are targeting. So if you are targeting someone who can pay but won't pay, is maybe different to those that are struggling, genuinely struggling to pay. And our approach is adaptable depending on which particular person is in front of us.
Have we changed our write-off policy in terms of when we write off council house debt and council tax debts?
No, that's probably broadly the same as
probably the same. Thank you.
Okay, is that everything on the budget and the medium-term financial strategy?
We just thank the cabinet.
Thank you. More than welcome to attend.
Okay, agenda item 7 is the work programme. And as has been highlighted several times already, the Cabinet Member for Leisure has been invited to the next meeting to talk about both the museum and the facilities run by the Places Leisure Company. So that, oh, sorry, just lost my screen. Those are 2 items that will be on the next agenda. And hopefully we will be receiving the final report from the task and finish group. I would suggest that as this meeting will be in March, that we probably won't try and put anything new on the work programme, because we'll be crashing straight into the elections, and new members of the ONS post-election will possibly have different views as what they want to do anyhow. So I think this coming meeting in March will be essentially a wrap-up session, and hopefully we will get some useful information from the Cabinet Member for Leisure, and some useful information from the task and finish group. Any comments? Sorry, yes, Councillor Chow.
In March, will we not be looking at the third quarter figures?
Sorry, yes, that is on there, and yes, we will. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, yes, Councillor John.
In your summing up of the meeting, what recommendations or comments are you going to take from this meeting this evening to council or to cabinet?
I haven't even thought about that. Sorry, I haven't even thought about that yet, but I don't think there's been any major disagreements as to the budget or anything else, quite honestly. So I will be there, and I will take the opportunity, the time in the meantime, to think if there's anything that specifically coming up. But I think generally tonight everyone has been broadly in favour of what is being proposed for the budget.
May I just suggest there have been a number of comments made on the budget and the capital programme that might be reflected and reported back to cabinet. We're very grateful to have the cabinet member here this evening, but it may be worthwhile to air some of those comments later on. That's part of our role, isn't it? I mean, unless you feel that this committee feels that that there's no comment, and Scrutiny has no comment on anything that the council's doing at the moment.
Okay, as I said, I will take the opportunity in the next couple of days to consider what we've talked about and bring them up at the cabinet meeting. But I have been focusing on chairing the meeting rather than thinking about the cabinet meeting, quite honestly. Okay, sorry,
can I just say that Councillor Greening has been doing a little bit of research during this meeting, and he's indicated that an answer to my question, one of my questions, which was that we are the lowest council tax in the whole of Sussex, both east and west. I think, Billy, I've got that right, haven't I? I believe so.
Thank you for that update. I'm sure people will be pleased to hear that. Okay. There's no urgent business on the agenda, so with that, I will close the meeting at 6:51.